So you want me? No, I'll start. The Office of State Ethics was established in 2005 as the successor agency to the State Ethics Commission, which some of you, I'm sure, recall was taken apart somewhat in connection with the Rowland scandal. It was a time when Connecticut's moniker was Corrupticate. There was an interest in creating a more robust ethics regime, I'll call it. The Citizens Ethics Advisory Board is the board that replaced the Ethics Commission, and the Office of State Ethics provides training and education as well as legal advice and guidance. We enforce and we provide transparency through the collection of lobbyist registrations and reporting, as well as statements of financial interest from state employees and public officials in high-ranking positions. We have gone from, well, I've been here since 2008. My budget when I walked in the door was $2.3 million approximately, with 21 positions. Today, my budget is 1.4, almost 1.5 $1 million with 15 employees. If the proposed cuts take place, I will be looking at 1.4 million and probably will be facing an additional 3 position cuts, which will bring me down to 12. We have been, since I got here, it's been a death of 1,000 cuts, but we have always participated in the solution. We have taken, cuts and suggested ways to be more efficient, and have practiced lean processes in our agency. We've done everything we can. We're at the point now where we are going to not be able to meet our mission. We're skeletal right now, but this final cut will make us ineffective. And we are one program. It's one holistic program where everything feeds into each other. The training we provide, if we don't do training, we're going to see less people seeking advice. If we have less people seeking advice, we're likely to have more enforcement. Enforcement is much more costly for the state than I'd rather give advice to 1,000 people than enforce against 100. And those are kind of how the numbers break down. We need support. In this budget, we've all been asked to identify our core services. Well, I have one program. It's to administer and enforce the Code of Ethics. The Office of State Ethics is a core program for state government. The primary responsibility of government is to protect the integrity of our democracy. And that is what, together, we do. We have tried to be part of the solution in terms of the budget crises that Connecticut continues to face. But at some point, by cutting us so much, we become part of the problem because we will not be able to achieve our mission. I could go on, but I'll stop.
I think probably we'll ask you questions when
Sure.
is done. Thank you.
Once again, thank you for seeing us today. We really appreciate the opportunity to come to talk to you about our programs and what we're facing in this budget crunch right now. Once again, I'm Michael Brandy. I'm the Executive Director and General Counsel for the State Elections Enforcement Commission. And much of what Carol has already said is true also for state elections. We have always participated in budgetary givebacks, and what Carol didn't mention, though, was that in 2011 into 2012, when the Office of Governmental Accountability was formed, which kind of maneuvered and consolidated all of our agencies along with a bunch of smaller agencies. We lost in that time frame 40% of our budget. We lost 19 people out of 53. We are now down to 35. So when we presented testimony in front of appropriations, we kind of started with the adage that we already gave at the office. We have been one of the few agencies, the three of us together, we have suffered already 40% cuts to our budget and to our personnel. So our missions have not changed. The mission for the State Elections Enforcement Commission we have multiple purposes. We are the repository in paper and electronic form for campaign finance reports from town committees, PACs, and all of the legislative and statewide offices. We are responsible for giving compliance advice on campaign finance law to all of the different levels of government, from municipal all the way up to the governor's office. We have our enforcement responsibilities are not just campaign finance law, but all election laws. We are our commission, our 5-member bipartisan commission, handles all election law complaints statewide. And finally, and one of the largest things we do now is, obviously, we are the administrators of the Citizens Election Program, which is the public financing of campaigns at the General Assembly level and at the statewide level. A program, by the way, that has become a national model. We have the best public financing program in the country, and part of that program is now at risk because of course, budget cuts and continued, just general threats in the campaign finance world. We have, over the last 2 years, fought off efforts by the Democratic Party, the governor's office, in several large, highly publicized cases. We take our watchdog role very seriously. We are an agency of only 35 people. We have suffered major budget cuts, and we have lost key personnel in all areas of our, not just our business office, but all areas of our substantive work. We are at bone. We cannot lose any more employees, and we cannot lose any more budget resources, or else we will not be able to perform our mission. And we think our mission is pretty important with a national election coming this year, as well as a full General Assembly election. We anticipate major issues that are going to have to be addressed. And a lot of what we do, especially in our compliance end, is we keep people out of trouble. Our goal is not to simply be a gotcha agency and to enforce on the back end when people make mistakes. We are an agency that looks to help and to support candidates and treasurers and make sure that the elections and the integrity of the elections are maintained in large part through our compliance network. We handle on an average year somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 inquiries into our office, and we track all of these. We track everything electronically. As Carol also said, our agency, since this consolidation occurred, because we lost so many people, because we lost so many budgetary resources, we have adopted lean principles. We have gone through everything the governor said in his State of the State about adopting lean principles and moving to electronic formats and becoming much more efficient like the rest of the world. Well, our agencies have already done that. We've been doing that. The State Elections Enforcement Commission has one of the best electronic campaign finance registries in the country. And it takes time and effort and money to make sure that we keep that system up and running, and that is our eCRIS system. That is a system which allows the public at large to be able to review campaign finance reports from their home computer. We are in the process of doing a pilot program right now to bring those resources down to the municipal level, so that every municipal campaign that is waged in Connecticut, those campaign finance reports, which now are currently housed in the town clerk's offices in various formats, there's no standard indexing or any other methodology that's employed. We're looking at a pilot program to now take those campaign finance filings, which are right now, they utilize our forms from SEEK. They also call our office for advice on those forms. We interact continually with the town clerks and the registrars of voters. But we're looking to move those documents up to our electronic system and have them filed with SEEK as a central repository for the state, reversing an unfunded mandate to the towns and having something that's open and transparent for all campaign finance filings statewide. And we're doing this without asking for more money. We're doing this with existing systems that we have. So if you want to look at a model system, don't look at DMV, obviously, with the disaster they've had in their building a computer system, come to Seek. We'll show you how it's done. We built it in-house. We had some outside expertise that helped develop our system, but our system is continually looked at as a model for how to build and how to maintain an electronic campaign filing repository that's open and accessible to the public. We are all about openness and transparency in the forms of our disclosures. Disclosures are, as in the aftermath of Citizens United, where campaign finance laws have been under assault, disclosure was one piece of that decision which not a lot of people talk about. And our agency has been a proponent of further disclosure to make sure that the process and campaign finance and money in politics that information is open and available to the citizens to evaluate for themselves. And in this coming year, we are facing obviously a major national election, contested primaries at the national level. The enforcement side of our office has been getting smaller. We've had retirements, we've had losses of personnel along the way, but we are at bone. We cannot suffer any more losses right now. At full strength, I have 3 investigators to cover the entire state. Our docket on average right now is over 200 cases, and they rise from campaign finance to election administration cases. We have a significant load that we have to try to investigate and resolve, and our team does a great job, and they try to get things to the commission as quickly as possible for resolution, but we can't do it without money and without people. And as I said, we have participated in give-backs all along. One of the things to look at this year as you look at how this budget has been presented by the governor, he's talking about a 5.75% across-the-board cut for all agencies. But what's not talked about is we already in current fiscal year 16, through the deficit mitigation plan in December and through prior holdbacks this year, we already lost 7% of our budget. So he's stacking 7% cuts with another 5.75% cut. So our total cut this year was in the 12 to 13% range. On an average year, we run the entire agency outside of our personnel on around 13% of our budget. So we're not being left with very much in the form of available resources to conduct all of our operations. And again, it's not just people, which are essential to our work, but it's also maintaining our computer systems, maintaining our repository systems, and maintaining our ability to train and have the outreach with the public. And again, we handle, one other piece we handle is the Election Day Hotline. This is a national election year. In 2012, the Election Day Hotline, which again we staff from 6 in the morning till 8 at night, handle over 600 calls in one day. And that's the kind of volume that our group sees. And those do lead to complaints being filed, and a lot of it is also just outreach and information for the public. We need to have the people and the staff resources in order to meet those needs. And elections is not something that can be privatized. It's a core function of government, and maintaining the integrity of the electoral system is paramount to our democracy. That's a lot of who we are and what we do. And again, I just want to reiterate one piece with the Citizens Election Program, which has been under a ton of pressure. A lot of the reforms that you have seen since 2005 and getting rid of the moniker of corrupticate has been due to Carol's efforts with state ethics and through things like the Citizens Election Program. We have changed the course of debate. I received a phone call just yesterday and an interview yesterday from a reporter in Mississippi who was looking at the problems that the state of Mississippi has in their campaign finance world and in their elections. And they were calling us because Connecticut is looked at as a model. Connecticut nationally is one of the states where people are looking at our campaign finance system, our publicly financed campaigns, the bans we have put in with regard to state contractors and sessional bans for lobbyists. They've looked at the improvements we've done that way, as well as the capabilities to enforce the law that our commission has. And other states are looking to us as a model, while in our state they keep looking for ways to break us down. And so that's why we're looking to the board today to kind of help us with our message, and we're here to answer any questions on our mission. But we believe that we perform such a core, essential role in government and we're so small. I mean, we're budget dust out there. I mean, the total sum of our budgets together amounts to probably 1/10,000th to 1% of the state budget. We're a very, very small percentage, but we perform an essential function, and we want that to be the real message today.
I just asked one question. So you're talking about this pilot program, or is that going to go for the
The pilot-
municipality?
The pilot program's already been passed. We're actually implementing, the 20 towns have been selected by the commission this month, and we're going to begin that process. That's a process that will continue through the next municipal elections. So what we're doing there is to look at how municipal candidates do their filings. The town committees already file with us, and a lot of candidates file through the town committees, so those are already with us. But we're also looking at the general, for example, in the city of New Haven, if the mayor is running her campaign, those campaign finance filings, which are now housed in their town clerk's
In a
office.
drawer in the town clerk's office.
Exactly. We would now have those electronically in through eCris. You'd have immediate access to those. And also duties like the fines and late penalties that are imposed on treasurers for not doing proper filings in the campaign finance world. All those responsibilities would come to us, which makes it an easier process also for the town clerks, because that's a very uncomfortable process often when you're in small towns where you're trying to monitor those kind of filings that need to be done. So all those responsibilities would come up to the SEEK, and we would maintain that repository, which is already there. It's in eCris.
Okay. I'll get the list of towns for you. I'm sure it's right on,
Yeah.
You probably even sent it to us.
It'll be on our meeting this week on Wednesday. We'll have some discussion about it at that meeting, and those 20 towns will be selected by the commission at this coming meeting.
Okay.
They've gone through the whole application process.
One last, I'm Colleen Murphy, the Executive Director and General Counsel at FOI. Tried to scrounge up some cards for you, and I think this is symbolic of where we are right now. I can only find 2. So, I'm going to let you all share those. So I've been at the Commission for over, oh my goodness, just about 25 years now. The FOI Commission, we have one core function too, and that's to administer and enforce the FOI law. And I'm sure you all know about our law. I think that freedom of information, government transparency is a cornerstone of democracy, and it's critical, as Carol said. It's a core function of our government. It's a core aspect of making sure that citizens know what their government is up to. And I think over the past now, since 2011, as the others have referenced, the consolidation of the FOI Commission into this Office of Governmental Accountability, one of the things that I want to highlight is the independence issue, that we've been terribly worried about this issue really since 2011, when we were originally proposed to be merged in an overt manner, in my view, to take away our independence. These positions would have been eliminated. We would have been put into one uber agency, shared functions, all led by an appointment. Somebody was appointed by the governor. So we, fought that, and we got this mishmash agency that we're now in. And I think since that time, what we're seeing is, in a more covert manner, attacks on our independence by these cuts. And Mike talked about the stacking of the cuts over time. For us, since 2011, we had a staff of 23. We now have a staff of 15. I think the budget was somewhere around 2.5 million. Right now, the governor's proposed a budget of 1.5 million for us. What that budget means to us for next year, which I was pretty shocked when I rolled out, when our business office rolled out the personnel costs for us alone next year, we would not be able to pay everybody. We would be minus over $100,000, and that's before we even turn on the lights, pay the copier lease, pay our commissioners to come and do hearings. We have no money to do anything. So my estimation is we would probably have to cut 3 to 4 of those 15 people. We have 10 lawyers, 1 education officer, and the rest are some support staff. So it would be terribly severe for us to do that. And I guess my message, one of the legislators had said, we're at the stage where we're not just doing cuts, we're taking limbs. When I thought about it today, I'm thinking, we're actually taking the torso of the Freedom of Information Commission and leaving the limbs kind of strewn along the floor. And without the torso, the limbs aren't going to be able to function at all. So that's, I guess that's my primary concern. In terms of, what we do, as I said, administer and enforce the FOI law. We're projecting about over 1,000 complaints this year. and we have a strong timeline. We have to deal with those because information is usually meant to be timely when it has any value at all. So we have to hear our cases within 1 year, or we lose jurisdiction, which means citizens lose jurisdiction. So in addition to that, we do a lot of education, as the others do, because we feel like, well, that's a constant process to keep educating public officials and keep bringing them along. Aside from that, the only other thing we really do is litigate cases. When people appeal our decisions, we go to court and our lawyers defend them. So all of those things, I think, would be jeopardized. We can't utilize the AG's office like other agencies because, going back to independence, we need to have our people handle those cases, not the Attorney General's office, when many appeals involve state agencies who are represented by the Attorney General. So, those are the limited things we do. We just don't have any fat in our budget anymore. And as I said, when we projected out those numbers, looking to cut another 3 to 4 people from our staff, that's serious business. So that's the message.
Obviously we consider ourselves watchdogs too, so this is kind of an odd conversation with watchdogs on the watchdogs, but I just wanted to point that out. But for the average Connecticut resident with the Freedom of Information Commission, because we're obviously not average because we would utilize your agency a lot more than other people. If we're looking at those kind of cuts, what's the outcome for the average Connecticut resident?
Mm-hmm. Well, most of the cases, a lot of people think the law is a media law, but 75 to 80%, and maybe even more than that at this point, are brought by citizens who are, interested in their local issues, whether the Board of Ed should have gone into an executive session, like how the budget impacts their children, whether there's asbestos in the school, and how that's being handled. So those kinds of issues, there wouldn't, if we weren't here, there really wouldn't be a place to go to challenge government when citizens are not given access to those kinds of things. So, they're local issues that affect people locally in their daily lives, and that's, that is hard if you talk about the big picture for people to understand. I have this story that I tell about my father-in-law who is a very outgoing guy. He was doing some real estate work toward the end of his life, and he would go into town hall, and he came out and said, Pauline, I got the assessor's list, and she's really nice, the assessor, she really likes me, and she gave me the list, no problem. And I said to him, well, that's great, but you're entitled to that list, and it's because of the law that I work to try to administer that you can have access to that without any issue. So I think sometimes that message gets lost with citizens, what it means to them, because so much information is available, and it's because of the Freedom of Information Law.
So you've been with the agency, you mentioned a couple of decades. I can relate to that. So how have you seen the government leaders' response to FOI law through that time? Do you think people are taking it more seriously or less seriously? I mean, from our side of the table, it seems like people still, a lot of government officials still don't take freedom of information law terribly seriously.
Right. I think that there's always an ebb and flow in terms of that, but I think technology has impacted it as well. Some people feel it's a big pain in the neck, and technology has made it worse for public officials. On the other hand, there are public officials who I've seen embrace technology, who believe in disclosure without even being asked for it. So at this point, I can't say that it's better or worse. I think that you see some really stellar public officials who believe that it makes life easier to provide access. I look at the state comptroller and how he led the charge for getting information online. And but I think in the smaller towns, you're going to have the same. It's not that it's resistance; it may be ignorance. It may be sort of unwillingness to move forward with the times. So I don't think it's necessarily any worse than it has been, but I think that education process that we do, we just kind of keep on top of the water by doing that. We keep staying afloat by continuing to educate.
And how much of that do you do? Like, what kind of outreach do you do with town officials?
Well, for us, we sort of have the motto, if they ask us, we will come. It doesn't really matter where we're going. It could be Ashford to, we try to have it be more than 1 or 2 people, but, if we can get a group, at least 5 people there, we will come and spread the word of freedom of information. Sometimes we order education as part of our decision-making process when we think it's really in need. We have an annual conference that we do. We have our website, which is very dynamic. We put all our decisions online. We try to answer the basic questions that we think people have. So I think those are the examples I can think of.
Same thing. We do dozens and dozens of trainings for treasurers, for candidates. We do it both in the realm of the Citizens Election Program. We do it in general campaign finance laws. We also deal with specific trainings for our ECRIS system because we have had a real push to try to save money, because when people are filing on paper with us, we have to actually data enter that into the system and go through and pay for outside resources to have data entry done. We try to do as much as we can in-house. But again, we just don't have the resources anymore. So we have to go through a whole process of getting those documents into the ECRIS system. So we have a huge push on for education and training, because again, that's what keeps people out of our enforcement zone. And it's very well received. We had our first training last week for the upcoming election cycle, and we had 20 treasurers sitting there looking to learn the process and making sure that they understand how to interact with our agency. We also have the systems put in place so that every candidate for the General Assembly this year, and we'll see somewhere around 300 to 350 candidate committees that will file with us. That's just candidate committees. We'll deal with this year approximately 1,000 committees will file with us. That's PACs, town committees, and candidate committees. The committees that file, the candidate committees for the General Assembly, are each assigned an election officer in our office and have direct lines of communication so that we can head off as many of the real issues as they come along. Because again, our whole mission is to keep them advised, educated, and out of trouble. And that's generally very well received, and generally people love interacting with our staff in that way. We get raised. We do a survey at the end of every election cycle to make sure we're on top of the issues. We do a survey of all the treasurers and try to continually improve our processes wherever we see issues. So we don't kind of sit back on it. We really are interactive and proactive in trying to make our systems work.
Do you think none of your agencies have any kind of are able to mandate training unless it's an enforcement action? Is that right?
Actually, my statute says that we shall provide annual training to all state employees. We have one trainer. One person whose primary job is training, because in a small office everybody does more than one thing. We have done, I think the last calendar year, about 100 face-to-face trainings. We just updated our streaming video, which is available online, because each state agency has an ethics liaison, and we push a lot of information and material out to them. We have an online training program. We have worked with agencies, including creating a Train the Trainer program with the state police, so that we provided the ability for them to do an annual training with all police during their mandated training that every police officer has to have. We've also partnered with agencies so that we've really focused on one agency, gone in and done a bunch of training. And as a result of that, we've actually learned of some things that were going on that could lead to ethics violations, and we've worked with the agencies to create systems that will avoid that. What I think that our training does, and what my goal of our training is not to make everybody an expert on the code, because it's an intricate code. They're not going to be. But to create in them an awareness of what the issues are in general, number one, and number two, the fact that we exist to provide them advice to keep them out of trouble. But what we're really doing in the end is we're trying to change culture. Culture change is hard, and you do it a person and an organization and a group at a time. That's what we do. Between the website and everything that we do, we're trying to push training out as much as possible. And we've seen the partnership that changed the culture of that agency regarding some stuff. So we're doing the train the trainer so that we can do outreach. But we are mandated. It's quite the challenge for a small agency to do that.
And our agencies generally are always facing little tweaks and changes to legislation. It's
Mhm.
constant. I mean, if you go before the GAE committee, you'll see the dozens, if not hundreds of bills that are proposed every year that are looking to change elements of all of our laws. So we constantly have to keep up with those changes. For example, our staff creates guidebooks for every level of elections.
Mhm.
We have to continually update these guidebooks. It takes a lot of resources to be able to make sure that the appropriate information is out there so that as part of the training regimen, but just general information is out there so people are on the straight and narrow and doing the right things. But we're constantly on the go. We're over at the legislature constantly trying to watch these bills, testify in these bills. Without legislative staff, we don't have these kind of liaisons and additional staff. Most of us do it ourselves. We're looking at changes in the election laws and the campaign finance bill. There's dozens of bills that'll be up this year that we continue to have to monitor, and we monitor all the way to the final bell, because the bills that generally do change our laws are the ones that come out at midnight, and the ones that there's no debate on, and the ones that will shift whole avenues of our laws, because our laws also directly impact the politicians in General Assembly and statewide offices. So we have to have a keen eye on those and be ready all the time.
So with the cuts, it must be really challenging to identify corruption and illegal activity with campaigns.
We try to stay as vigilant as we can, and we are reliant a lot on citizen complaints. We're reliant on complaints that come from registrars, town clerks, and we call them our eyes and ears. And we repeat that continually with all the conventions and conferences we go to with other municipal officials. It is difficult, and we try to maintain a process and procedure all the time to handle all the complaints that come to us that involve improper conduct by campaigns, treasurers, and we do the best we can. But when you keep cutting back our resources and cutting them back, it truly impacts it. I mean, we have, and I said this in my testimony, a couple weeks ago at the legislature. As part of what we've all had to do is we've had to train and cross-train all of our employees on all different functions of our offices. Because you know what? At the end of the day, when you look over your shoulder, there's no one following you. We have no additional resources. We have no additional people to cover certain small roles. So what we have to do is make sure all of our staffs are cross-trained in various areas of what we do, whether it's in our compliance end, it's in our enforcement end, our investigatory staff, our IT staff, who helps all elements of our compliance and enforcement teams to do their jobs. We have to do that in order to function, but that's where we are after 40% cuts, after going again from a staff of 53 down to a staff now of 35. We've suffered through these cuts, but we can't take any more and do our jobs.
So is this really, this whole thrust that started with the consolidation, is this just really political, that this is a political operation to try to basically not shut you down, but it almost makes you totally ineffective?
It's a really good question. We certainly see, we're obviously political players, and we're dealing with, in my context, I'm dealing directly with the political campaigns and the parties and all of that. We've got major lawsuits that are out there right now that
Right.
are at play. We've been sued on multiple occasions to try to, there was the DGA that sued us a year and a half ago to try to stop us from even getting to the point of investigating it, whether or not, in that case, it was a question of the governor's fundraising on behalf of the DGA, as to whether or not that could even be looked at as an element of an investigation should a complaint be filed with our office. They tried to get out even in front of that. We obviously have the case going right now, which is in the court systems, about our ability to investigate the Democratic State Central Committee and activities of the governor's campaign, the 2014 governor's campaign. That's obviously been, we're awaiting decisions now from the court, but that's a direct challenge to our enforcement ability and a direct challenge to our ability to enforce the election laws. So,
Do you have to go out? I mean, other agencies where we're used to this in New Haven forever, they're always going out and getting additional attorneys. I mean, they have a staff, but inevitably for big cases, they go out, they get other attorneys to come in. Do you have to handle this all
well,
inside?
in our context, we are not allowed to go to court on those cases. We have to use the Office of the Attorney General. So the Attorney General provides us with staff, of which our team works directly with them because we're the experts in the election laws. So we kind of have an intricate relationship here, and a difficult relationship sometimes, because we are reliant on utilizing the Office of the Attorney General, who in this context of the case we have right now, the Attorney General recused himself from the case because of the fact that he's the active Democratic Attorney General as well as a former chair of the party. So he actively recused himself, but his staff is our lawyers, and they're representing us in this case. They've done a good job. Murphy Osborne's been the lead attorney on it, and she's done a very good job for us in court. But we're just waiting at this point to see what the resolution of this case is and to see where it'll go from there.
Right, it's a big case. So you say you have your own attorneys? I mean, you don't go to the Attorney General's office.
No.
You're totally separate from
In
it. So
our statute, yes, and I think that ought to be in yours,
Yes.
if you don't mind my saying
It seems very
Because of
curious
this.
that you're not allowed to use the state, and you have to use the state.
Yeah, that's been talked about in our context for a little while now. There's been talk of giving us the ability to at least hire outside counsel, or because it can be, and it's no fault of the Attorney General's office. I mean, their staff is very good, but sometimes it does create, difficult relationships and difficult positions when somebody's recusing themselves, but at the same time, we're talking about a case here that involves the entire Democratic Party. So there has been talk about that in terms of, again, these intricate relationships, and our real independence is central. I have a staff of attorneys. I have, including myself, there are 10 attorneys in our office. We have them segmented into our compliance unit, who focus on legislation and answering the questions from the outside and doing the advisory opinions, deck rulings, opinions of counsel. That's what our compliance team does. Then I have a team of enforcement attorneys whose job is simply to take the complaints and the investigations that are processed by our investigators and to prosecute those cases and bring those to the commission. And their job is to act as prosecutors in those cases. So we have some distinct roles there. Again, we're just short of resources to handle all this, and we're falling behind on things because we just don't have enough people.
how many times do you have to go to court in a year? I mean, how many cases
Well,
go that
we get
far?
about 30 appeals a year. 30 and a lot of them go all the way to the Supreme Court. 30 a year, so at any given time there's probably 50 cases that are pending in court.
And when it comes to outside of FOI and SEC, what kind of questions do people come to you about? Like what kind of ethical concerns might people have?
Outside employment, I'm a state employee, and this is what I would do. I would like to do something in my outside employment. For example, someone who's a clinician at one of the agencies that provides clinical services may also want to do a practice outside of the state agency that employs them. So they may want to have some private clients. So there are restrictions on what you can do there. You can't, as a public employee, for example, refer people to yourself. And you can't represent those very people before your own agency. So there are a number of restrictions there. We get a lot of gifts questions. So And gifts is broad because it's anything of value. So we'll get questions like, can I go to this training event? Is it a gift to the state? Do I have to file necessary expenses because I've been invited to go speak for an organization? We get some questions about contracting with the state. Generally, if anyone in the state service is going to contract with the state, if it's greater than $100, it has to be through an open and competitive process. So, I mean, these are the questions we get on a regular basis. Use of position. You know, if I do this, is it a use of position that's benefiting me personally? We hear about that a lot. And we prosecute the same kinds of questions. We recently had a clinician who we fined $15,000 who was conducting some of his private practice using state resources. We also have jurisdiction over lobbyists, and lobbyists have significant restrictions, primarily in terms of what they can give to public officials that they're lobbying. So we get a lot of questions from them about what they can and can't do. There are some exceptions. For example, a lobbyist organization, a lobbyist can have one reception a year, called a legislative reception, and it's either inviting all of the General Assembly, and those usually would take place in Hartford, or doing a regional one, you know, depending on who they are. And there are limitations and there are reporting requirements that are involved with that. So we'll get questions about that. What can I do? What can't I do?
So
You know.
they can't have big JF parties every time a bill comes out of committee anymore.
Exactly. Well, I mean, they can have a party, but you know, there are limitations as to what they can spend, and then there's notification if the amount spent is over a certain amount given back to the legislators that attended, for example, and it's up to the legislators whether they want to accept the gift or reimburse for it. So you know, we get over 1,000 questions a year. Asking about, you know, this is what my situation is, you know, how do I deal with this? Post-state employment, revolving door issues is another biggie.
Do people ever ask you about political appointments to the various agencies and whether there are any conflicts with those individuals?
Those often take place as and complaints that go to enforcement, because the take then is that, you know, ex-politician appointed Y a political appointee, and they have some sort of relationship that seems unethical. So those become the beginning of an enforcement review, and that's a confidential process. So I can't confirm or deny any complaints that we may or may not have before us. But yeah, I mean, certainly we hear those kinds of questions. They generally are in the form of a complaint because they take place after the individual has been appointed. And sometimes we hear from people who are appointing authorities saying, does this raise any issues if I appoint this person who has these interests?
Yeah, that's what
and we're able
right.
to provide advice that way beforehand, and it'll often be either the individual being appointed, potentially an appointment, or the person that's making the appointment, and we answer those on a regular basis as well.
I think probably the only complaint we hear about the ethics department is that the rules aren't strict enough, particularly around conflicts of interest. I mean, that comes up constantly.
We don't have jurisdiction over municipalities. We have in the past,
Right.
And this year we proposed legislation to give us authority. I don't know that it will come out of committee, mostly because it will have a fiscal note. You know, we're all in an interesting place because the people that write the laws are subject to the laws. So, you know, it makes for an interesting dynamic. Certainly, there are laws that we think should be stricter. For example, in the conflict of interest provisions, We have proposed for probably since I've been here, and I've been here since late 2007, a law that we call our other employer law. Currently, under the conflicts law, you have a conflict if something you're going to take action on or be involved with would affect the financial gain or loss of you, your immediate family, your own business, or a business with which you're affiliated. Business with which you're affiliated is a term of art. It does not include your employer. So, for example, if I were a legislator who worked for a nonprofit and I were voting on budget line items involving grants to my nonprofit, I would be able to do that provided that the grant wasn't going to impact my salary or benefits. So if I was going to get paid $100,000, whether that went through or not, I would be able to participate in it as a legislator. And we've proposed, in our world, there's two ways you deal with things. You prohibit them or you require disclosure. And because we have a citizen legislature, we are mindful, and the former Ethics Commission in its decisions, which are binding on us, has been mindful of the fact that people come from all walks of lives. So for legislators, for elected officials, we've said it should be a disclosure. So you have to you either abstain or you disclose what the matter is, what your interest is, and why you can act fairly. So we bring disclosure to it. At the state employee level, you abstain or you disclose to your supervisor, and then a decision is made up the food chain from you as to whether you can or can't participate. So there's some prohibition and there's some disclosure, mindful of the roles that people play. We've been proposing that, and we will actually be testifying on it on Monday, but we've proposed it for several years.
All right. Because now, I mean, there's conflicts. I mean, again, because there's a citizen legislature. I mean, I can tell Tony Hart worked for an agency that was getting money, consistently getting money, and obviously she voted on the.
And it's because we didn't address other employer. Even in the language that we propose, you would have to be taking action that would specifically affect your employer. If it was the whole group, for example, if you worked for an insurance company and whatever you were doing was going to affect every insurance company, then because that's shared by a profession or a group, that wouldn't be a conflict of interest.
Right. But the real conflict is that per specific salary, I mean, just as an example, would be directly impacted by the bill that's before her, as opposed to the whole agency that she works for.
Right. I mean, the proposal would lead to if it affects the agency as opposed to if it just affects your pocket personally and you're the state actor.
You know, and some of what we're talking about too is going back to changing the culture and things that were enacted in 2005 in terms of ethics, and certainly with the advent of the Citizens Election Program, the state contracting ban, the sessional ban for lobbyists, and all the litigation that came after that. We have really begun to change how business is done at the legislature. The special interests don't have the ear of legislators the way they used to. And that's clear from what we see in legislation that's even being proposed. One of the bills we talk about all the time is the bottle bill. And for many, many years, the bottle bill money would come to the state and then go back to the bottlers. They could never pass the amendment because the lobby was too strong. So they could never pass an amendment where that money would then come to the state. Well, following the Citizens Election Program and following the changes that were implemented from 2005 on, they were able to pass that bill. That brings approximately $30 million into the state coffers this year and everywhere. So there's things that have been changed along the way, and the culture has changed. The influence of those lobbyists has changed. We received at one point a call from the New York Times. They were trying to do a story right after Sandy Hook, and they wanted to know who were the politicians who were supported by the NRA, who were getting money from the NRA. We explained to them, a publicly financed state, you won't find that data. One of my staff members spent hours with them, helping them to search our system, to search all the campaign finance reports. They came back to us within a day and said, we can't find it. And we're like, well, we told you, they're publicly financed, so you won't find that kind of lobbyist money coming into these elections. And we said, why don't you write a story on that, on the success of the program and what it's done to keep kind of that special interest money out of our politicians' hands and out of our campaigns. And they're like, well, it's not just enough. So they didn't want to run with that story, but we think that's an important story to tell, that the culture is changing, and it has changed over the last 12
But at
years.
the same time, we have seen since 2005 some pretty substantial scandals
Sure.
as well. Let's look at the 5th district race a couple of years ago, and
But that was
what
federal.
happened there.
It was
That
yeah,
was
it was
No, I
federal.
understand that, but
There was
but-
state of what happened.
I understand that, but the
Mhm.
players
Yeah.
started out at the state level.
You're absolutely right.
So that is, I think that's a fair game.
But that's where it's important to look at what our enforcement realm is too, because we had the Ernie Newton case where we had a state senator who was basically tried for larceny, for basically accepting and maneuvering campaign contributions to his benefit in order to qualify for a grant. We had the Christina Ayala case, which was election fraud, where she was voting in a district she did not live in. We've had those cases, so we've had successful, and that's on the criminal side. We've had lots of civil prosecutions and assessed fines and penalties for small violations or smaller violations. But we are there looking at those cases. We are there able to refer those to the chief state's attorney where we see those kind of criminal acts that go on. So there is vigilance, but once again, we're not there and we're not properly funded and we don't have the people. We're not there to catch those. And so that's what it's so important. What we're saying today is that it's critical for us in the watchdog role that we are to have the sufficient resources in order to make sure that we're on top of those cases. And public corruption is a major issue that has to be examined, and we have to constantly be on our best game to be able to make sure we're there to serve the public. And if we're not doing it, the public is not being served.
What kind of reaction are you getting from legislators? I mean, obviously there's some self-interest in probably having fewer watchdogs
Sure.
on their tails. So how do they react to your pleas?
I think that with the most recent announcement that they're looking at a $900 million deficit instead of a 5.75, I think people are still absorbing it, but most people are saying there's no money. We're going to have to make some drastic changes. I think that. As I said, they're asking us all to look at our core services, and within each entity, not just us, they're asking everybody to look at what your core services are. And I'm not sure that they've gotten to the question of, well, what are government's core services? And that's policy decisions, and they're hard decisions. I don't envy any legislator sitting right now because the challenges are immense. And you're in a position where you're trying to salvage so much when there's no money to salvage it. But I think it's kind of premature to answer that in one way because everybody's just trying to absorb it now.
But there are pieces that we have seen some pushback on. One is the block granting.
Yeah.
The governor's made a major push to do more block granting, and we well know this because he's tried this with us now several times, and that's, again, to attack our independence and our ability to do our jobs. Within the Office of Governmental Accountability itself, if you look at the governor's proposal, we're the only 3 that were left as our own budget lines, and that's because we have statutory protection in each of our enabling legislation. We have statutory protection over our budgets and over our substantive work. And that was maintained by the legislature to prevent any governor, not just this governor, but any governor from coming in to try to attack the watchdogs for doing their jobs. So But the rest of the OGA, if you look at all the other smaller agencies, the smaller watchdogs, like the Child Advocate and the Victim Advocate, their monies now are being taken from them and absorbed up into the governor's administrator. We think that that's, not something that's to the benefit of the public, especially, just for an example, the Child Advocate's role is to review and watch DCF. And she's come out with some, pretty, stinging reports about lack of good work by DCF. And I can't imagine if she doesn't have her independent budget line item and she doesn't have the ability to conduct her work independently, I can't imagine that she's going to have an effective office anymore. So that's a concern for all of us in the sense of, as we see this effort to try to block grant monies, it's more of an effort to try to consolidate, we think, and eventually eliminate agencies. And we think that the watchdog agencies are, again, a core part of government and provide a core service that we need to get enough people out there to understand. Because, again, we're so small that it's easy to put this stuff in a budget and nobody sees it. Nobody's going to, when you look at budgets like transportation or DSS or others, we're talking billions of dollars. When you're talking small watchdog agencies like us where, Carol and Colleen are looking at, $1.5 million budgets. Mine's about, 3.2, 3.5 million in that range. We're budget dust. Nobody sees us. And so if we're not out there advocating for our organizations and our commissions, our fear is that we'll get swept up into this budget debate and eliminated.
So what's the amount of your budget line item? I know you said it was.
This year, my operating budget is $3.6 million. And of that, the vast majority of that budget is for the personnel, the limited personnel I have. That's down from $5.3 million in 2011. So again, we took significant cuts, and that's down 19 people from our high in 2012, when we were at 53 employees.
You had to lay off 19 people?
They were transferred, they were laid off, they were retired. There was a whole series of displacement that occurred. A lot of those employees at the time were basically transferred to other agencies, but we did lose managers. We did have people who decided to retire at that point. But we lost a lot of core knowledge. And when the Citizens Election Program was built, many of those people were core into building the Citizens Election Program. But they also provide other functions for our office. As I said before, everybody's trained and cross-trained. Nobody's doing one job anymore. But we took significant cuts. Nobody else was doing that. I mean, our agencies took those cuts. If you go around to other state agencies back in that time, nobody took a 40% cut to their agency.
So is there a standard for your department in the budget, a standard amount?
Yeah, there's a line item for each of our agencies in the budget, which is just a one-line item budget allotment. And
What do
within that allotment,
what do you mean by standard?
So I get it. He clarified. I
Okay.
thought there was okay.
now,
So there's a line out to state that you have to have a budget.
correct. We are a separate line item within the Office of Governmental Accountability. We have a one line item of State Elections Enforcement Commission, and our budget this year is $3.62 million, I believe it is. And then within that line item, we have our own internal budget, which is personal services versus other expenses. And the vast majority of our budget is for the remaining personnel that we have. We're very lean. We run very, very lean.
Do you see the election money, public financing to go away?
We hope not. I mean, there was a challenge to it in December,
Right.
where they tried to suspend the program for the 2016 cycle. That was it's funny because it was a day that I was actually in court on the Democratic Party case. I came back to my office and I saw that there were a group of young House members and one senator who actually wrote a letter to leadership saying, no, the Citizens Election Program is core to our elections. It's core to their existence as legislators, and to not cut the program because they can't suspend it. When suspend means kill, because all the election laws, all the campaign finance laws are tied together. So to eliminate the Citizens Election Program would basically throw the elections sucked into chaos. So we are watching very carefully to see if there's any more threats to the program. The Citizens Election Fund, which is a non-lapsing fund, which is what the campaigns are funded through, has taken major hits already. In fact, in this current budget cycle, this 2-year budget cycle, the legislature already took $7.75 million out of that fund for fiscal year 2017.
Right.
So they keep shaving money out of the fund to a point, at some point, it's going to be short of money, and we're going to need to find a way to put money back in to fund the elections. I have enough money in that fund right now to run the 2016 elections without any problem. But it's a combination of the fund has to have enough money, and we have to, as an agency, have to have the people and the resources in order to conduct the election as well. And again, it's all different pieces, which is the program applications and the grants themselves, but there's also the other parts of the compliance advice, keeping campaigns advised, because they call us. They can't wait 3 weeks for an answer. When they're calling our agency for a response, they need an answer now, because they're conducting some part of their campaign, they're going to spend money on some issue, they want to make sure they're doing it right. So it's core to our services that we are kind of Johnny on the spot and we get an answer to them immediately. It may take a couple hours, but we will make sure that they have an answer as soon as possible. So those are all core components. And then on top of it is the enforcement function. So we're constantly watching what happens both in the campaign finance world as well as in election administration, because remember, the Secretary of State does not enforce the law. We do. So, like the Hartford situation with the Hartford elections, with the craziness of not opening polls on time and all that, that is a complaint that's not pending with us.
One of the things, going back to your question about, what kind of response are we getting from legislators, I think that there's some sympathy and concern, oh boy, we have to protect the watchdogs, but because we are so small and because the numbers are getting so drastic that we keep hearing, our fear is that it'll just be, we're just like a little noise that we're making. So that's our challenge, is to get this message out, which is what we care so much about and what we're trying to do today. One of the things that I was trying to look at, we talk about how, well, the governor's going out saying, I gave every agency across the board this 5.75% cut. But if you look at ours, it's more in the 14, 15% range, because we call it stacking. They're kind of adding on other cuts that have been done over the years. What I've been trying to figure out, and I'm really no expert at all with numbers, but just looking at the budget documents that have come out, I can't tell how that stacks up for other agencies. Anybody as big as DSS down to, a smaller agency, because of this block grant thing that's going on. You can't tell if any of the other agencies were reduced significantly, because it's like their budgets are zeroed out and then put elsewhere. So you can't tell how much the elsewhere was reduced from what they had asked for or what they had budgeted for. So, I find that very frustrating, especially when I know the governor's people are going around saying this is the most transparent way of doing the budget. But, I can't even get that little question answered. How do we stack up against every other agency? I see a 14% cut to my agency. Well, what about the others? I can't tell. I have no idea what they were cut.
Well, they'll talk. I mean, we've had people in here, Mr. Fasano, Mr. Looney, saying they don't like this. I mean, essentially, it's their purview actually to look at these. So, but on the other hand, they'll say, well, maybe some of these things should be block grants, but it's uncertain what they're talking about or which agency. So, and Mr. Fasano was like, why even start talking about it if we're actually going to revert back to the system as it always was, which is wasting time. You know what I mean?
I think the other thing to note about the 5.75% cut across all agencies is that it has the same effect as a flat tax does. It's regressive, and when you're a small agency with limited resources, the impact is less. I mean, it's greater than, and the impact is great for every agency, but it's almost regressive in the same way that one of the positions that I probably will lose if we experience these cuts is the one support staff that I have in my office to provide clerical support, which means we're all already doing most things ourselves, because one person obviously can't support 15 people, but in a bigger agency, they can say, okay, we have 15, we're going to drop it down to 12. And they still have functionality. We lose functionality. And that's true, in lots of different ways. When you're one program and you've got everything holistically related, whatever you say, well, I'm going to take this out of here, it affects everything else, and we start a downward spiral. We're skeletal as we are.
We have one clerical person for the entire agency. And that person is currently a vacant position for us. So everybody's pitching in to do, every job in the agency. So then this is what I'm saying before, when you start looking over your shoulder and there's no one else there, that's where we're at. We don't have any extra resources. Everybody is pulling extra duty everywhere they can to make sure that the agencies function. And we have very good, very dedicated staff. We can't praise them enough for the job that they do and the job they're continuing to do. And it's hard for them because they're sitting there doing this with the threat of layoff and the threat of displacement hanging over their heads all the time. So, we really do want to compliment the staff as much as possible because they're doing a great job, and they're trying to keep their heads down and do their work with all of this budget talk going on around them. But it is concerning for them, and we hear the buzz all day from them as well.
I think the other thing that's facing us differently than many people is that the 2011 consolidation took from the three of us our kind of business support staff and those operations. And when you're in a small agency, they were doing other things as well. My fiscal administrative assistant at the time was also the key person that answered lobbyist technical questions about filings. So we lost both of those functions. Well, most state agencies now are looking at, okay, what can we cut? And oftentimes you try to keep program. So you look at your business functions. We don't have a business function to cut now. We're going right to program, right to core things that we do, so it's, we're facing very interesting challenges. I think we all have the position that most people in state government, most people that we have jurisdiction over, are like you and me. They get up every day, they go to work, and they try to do the best job that they can. And that we're there to help them to do that. Of course, we all have enforcement or decision-making authority where sometimes people don't seem able or willing to do that. And then it's our job to fairly and vigorously enforce the law. But, we're getting to the point where we're not going to be able to help them. And that's unfair to all of us. It's unfair to all of the citizens, that people are going to walk into problems that could have been prevented.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate the amount of time you spent with us.
We appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I really do. I've never come to one of these before, so it's really nice. And I think all three of us really, this isn't just a job to all of us. We really care, so we wanted to make some time to come see all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The advances that communicators made, we just don't want to see us regress.